Hey everybody, this is Rachel Olson. I am the librarian for PSC 391, African Political Systems, for the fall 2020 semester. I'm really excited to be working with you all this semester. I want to start off by saying that I completely understand that we are in some extraordinary times, some extraordinary circumstances. So I want to make it absolutely clear to you that you should feel free to email me if you need assistance with any of the things I'm going to be talking to you about, or your library research in general. I'm happy to help you with. So the two best ways to get in touch with me are, number one, by email. It's just rachel.olson@uncg.edu. You can also use this link, go.uncg.edu/Rachel. That will take you to my appointment calendar, and all my appointments are virtual this semester, but I'll be happy to meet with you one-on-one, talk about anything that's giving you trouble or anything that you would like more details about. So I'm available. I'm here for you. The link to these slides, which I would encourage you to write down somewhere or bookmark on your browser, go.uncg.edu/PSC391lib1. And this is going to be embedded into your Canvas course. Of course, I'll try to make it linked in as many places as possible, but that is the link if you would like to follow along as you're watching this video and have a copy of the slides open for yourself. I wanted to provide that. All right, so we're going to be spending, as it says in your syllabus, some time on information literacy this semester, which has to do with identifying information needs, thinking about academic sources and popular sources and the context in which we use them and in the context in which they're created, and communicating information from sources for specific purposes. A lot of this applies directly to your research as political science students for this course. So I have some learning outcomes here. I won't read all of them out. Based on our information literacy student learning outcomes that we have in the library. So if you're interested in learning more about this, definitely let me know. But these are my goals for you in terms of your information literacy skills this semester. And we're going to do a variety of activities and lectures to kind of help you out to achieve these goals. So I want to talk a little bit about research questions, because you are going to be presented with some research topics in this course that you're going to need to be able to find information on. And in a very basic way, I want to make sure we all understand the nature of research questions and how to make sure that you're doing a good job of forming a research question. So it should be something that you're interested in, obviously. This is something that you're going to spend some time learning about, and why not make it something that you want to engage with, something you've always wanted to learn more about, maybe. Obviously, in line with any instructions that you've been given, you want to make sure that you are following directions manageable. Don't make it too broad. Don't make it too narrow. And I'll show you some examples of that. And then original. You should also feel free to base your research question on other, questions that are out there, but try to make it, something that hasn't been done to death. Okay. And here's just some nice examples of sort of research questions in political science. If you're curious, you can, of course, use the link. You have the link to these slides to kind of check this out a little bit more. I just thought it was interesting. It kind of breaks them down into types of questions. So are you looking at something more explanatory, something descriptive, a policy question, or a political theory question? And some of that, you'll be given directions that kind of lead you toward one of these or another, but I also want you to consider exploring other types of questions that you're interested in. Here are some political science sort of related questions that I have worked with in the past. When do states adjust their economic policies in response to economic downturns? And then how do domestic struggles for power affect nuclear proliferation agendas? And what I do is, when I have a research question formed, I will often break down the most important words or the key words of the question. So for that first one, the most important terms there would be economic policies and economic downturns. And then the second one, struggles for power and nuclear proliferation. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this. So if it's not making sense just yet, don't worry. So here's another example. What influence does China have over Nigeria in terms of oil issues? This was actually an example that a PSC 391 student last semester was looking at, and I thought it was great. It's not too broad, it's not too narrow. It's something that, we have multiple options for keywords to pull from here. You also may want to consider being specific about a particular country in your question. That can sometimes help narrow it down a little bit. Instead of searching across all African countries, right, you could potentially choose one or two to compare. I want to show you another example of forming keywords strategically. So here's another potential political science question. What has been the international community's response to piracy off the coast of Somalia? So I wrote it out as a question. I went through and highlighted what I considered to be the most important words: international community, piracy, and Somalia. And then I came up with synonyms, alternative words with the same meaning for each of those terms. So you can see international community, I put global community, world leaders, piracy, pirates, Somalia, you could say Somalian, you could say African if you need to be a little bit broader. So it's really just about being strategic and choosing the words that you're going to use when you actually search within the library's databases and catalog, which we will talk about. So just something to consider there. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about evaluating sources. So when you have found a source of information, whether it's a website or a book or an article, anything like that, I want you to consider ABC. This is a system that I use a lot with students to help with evaluating sources. It is not a checklist. It isn't a guarantee of source quality. So go with your gut. And if you're ever not sure, I want you to ask Dr. Broche, ask myself for help. We will be happy to help you determine the reliability of the source. So A stands for authority and accuracy. So who is the author of this source? What are their credentials? How do we know that this author knows what they're talking about and is qualified to write about it? Does the source link to or reference other sources? This is important because if I can't find evidence that this person, did some research or backed this information up with something, I have no way of verifying the information. So it's really important that they've linked to other sources. And this shouldn't just be links on a website that take you to other pages within the website. This should link to other reliable outside sources. So B is bias. Is the organization known for having a particular leaning or bias? So this would be like if you found like a political action group or a lobbying group, something like that. You would want to be careful to recognize that they have a leaning, they have an agenda. You also want to consider, does the source consider multiple points of view? We're not really interested in sources that just sort of say, I'm right, everybody else is wrong, right? We want to have people that can acknowledge that there are other points of view on these issues and maybe can do some citing and some considering of those. And then what's the purpose of the source? Are they trying to sell you something? Are they trying to persuade you, inform you? Bias isn't necessarily the worst thing ever. Everybody has a bias. You want to just find sources that can sort of keep that to a minimum and can back up their information well. And then currency, when was the source created and how long has it been since it was last updated? This is really kind of your decision. I would encourage you, if you're researching sort of modern issues and topics, not to look at sources that are super old. Like for instance, if I'm doing a project on brain surgery, right, I'm probably not going to look at a source from the 1950s because our knowledge of that field has evolved a lot in the last few decades. There may be exceptions to this. If you were studying the history of brain surgery, for instance, you might want to go back and look at the older stuff. So again, if you're not sure, ask Dr. Broche, ask myself. This is a chart that you can kind of look at on your own. I find it pretty helpful when we're thinking about news and sources of news. There's always a lot of talk about this in election years. This is, a news reliability chart that was created back in 2016. And I would encourage you to take a look at it. So the x-axis is liberal to conservative, and then the y-axis is, if this is sort of junk writing, all the way up to some nice fact reporting sources. And you also have sort of the bias. And also keep in mind, this has to do with American political reporting. Other countries, it may be a little bit different. So for instance, I would encourage you to stay with news sources within the things that are in this gray box here, or this gray circle. That would probably be the safest bet. You definitely don't want to go probably beyond the middle of the road here. I wouldn't even really do that myself. And you certainly don't want sources that are sort of at the bottom here on either side. If you have questions about that, definitely let me know. All right, so now I want to switch gears and let's actually dig into some sources. So your library guide for this course, which should be on the left side of your Canvas course under library resources, and I will link it in several places in the presentation, is uncg.libguides.com/PSC391. So when you hear me reference your course guide or your lib guide, this is what I'm talking about. So it's a page of library resources that I have put together just for you. Here's me, my contact information. Here's the chat. So I'm going to just do a quick demo. I'm going to say, if it will let me. For some reason, my computer's being slow. But you could type in the chat box there. Here we go. And get some help. So I'm going to say, hi, it's Rachel showing some PSC students how to use chat. And they're usually pretty quick to respond. Pretty good about responding. And you'll get a nice ding and you can get some support in that way. So that is the chat service. And I would encourage you to use it. We're open usually 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. most days this semester. You can also schedule an appointment with me. I gave you that link earlier, but here's another link to it. So this home tab is just kind of navigational. It's got some information for you. One important thing, PSC 391 LibGuide quiz. I do want you to take this quiz. I want you to familiarize yourself with the LibGuide. I want you to do your best, and I would recommend going ahead and opening another copy of this in another tab. Consider it like an open note quiz, so you can feel free to have it open in another tab while you take this. I just want to make sure we're all basically familiar with this guide. So the APSA Citations tab, you're going to be using APSA citations for this course. It stands for American Political Science Association. Here's the full manual, okay, a PDF of it. I'm not sure why my computer's freezing up here, but you have the full manual. You also have, come on. You also have, I'm going to add a link to another citation page that has just sort of a quicker guide to APSA citations here. So look for that at the top of this page next time you use it, and I will make sure that it's put there.